Perfect.
So, it's lovely to be with you, Simon, and I've been looking forward to this conversation a lot because I think it's really important that we talk a little bit about why we wrote the book. For me, at a kind of deeper level, it's because we both love learning as well as both loving tennis so much. And we have such a strong shared history around tennis and around learning as well. I think it's important that we actually have a chat about that. So, could you just say a little bit about what it is made you want to write the book?
So I think what we wanted to do, Keith, between the two of us is bring the expertise that you've had in your career in both organisational and personal coaching and consultancy to my expertise, which is tutoring thousands of coaches over the last 15 years to actually write something that was really meaningful about helping them develop their athletes to the best of their ability.
It's interesting because for me, the stage where learning is quite confused in people's minds. We're on the cusp between where the world was about I know a lot and therefore I can teach you, and on the other side now is a much more modern approach, which is that the learner is the person that learns and the teacher is the person that actually helps that teaching. And there's lots of confusion, not just in tennis but in all sports and all levels of life, about what the coach can offer and what the player has to receive or learn for themselves. So for me it's timely that we're actually discussing it in this way, and to bring the parents in particularly is important because that core trio has to work together, otherwise you just don't get any maximum outcome at all. You just get kind of disparate, kind of hopeful types of outcome where things spurt forward rather than things move forward in concert.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think, as you said, especially in coach education, in most federations around the world, we focus really on the what to coach, not necessarily the how to have powerful coaching conversations. And that's where this book I think is really unique, is we go into a lot of detail around that coaching is not necessarily just an instruction biased profession, but it's actually around having powerful conversations which allow you to pull from the athlete themselves, and it makes it much more a co-creative type of a relationship that actually helps the athlete to then go on and achieve their potential.
Yeah, and I suppose central to that is the idea that a lot of moving forward to reach your goals and to fulfill yourself as a sports person or as generally a person is the idea that you actually have to unlearn a lot as well as actually learn new things, and how powerful the trio are at that, the coach, the player and the parent, at helping each other kind of unblinker themselves so they can actually see a way forward and move out of bad habits, move out of what we call the sour spot in the book, is really, really important, because that's where people do find that they feel out of their depth often, I think. They go, well, this is the way it is, what can we do about it? Rather than look for innovation, look for novelty, rather than work with the fundamental issue which isn't working and have that conversation.
Which led us to write the book and title it so passionately around, can we all find the sweet spot in everything that we do? And the sweet spot, as you said there, is about the trio mainly, and then there will be other stakeholders involved in the players' development, really working at their best in a fruitful way to create a much more powerful and positive tennis experience for all stakeholders, because that's what essentially the book is about, is how can we improve the tennis experience for all those that are involved in the child's development. And it's about the child, it's about being athlete-centred.
Yeah.
But sometimes we know that we have to be coach-driven still to develop the athlete. So the coach there is the major catalyst still in the structured player's development. And we still believe that's such an important part of being a powerful and a leader as a coach. But at the same time, it is still about the player's best interest at the heart of everything we do. And if we get that right throughout all the different stages of development that a player is in, we'll find the sweet spot and try to avoid all these sour spots that naturally occur.
Okay, Simon, so let's just dig into the book a little bit, and just looking at the chapters that we've focused in on. The first thing which was really important to us was that people actually understood their role. So that particularly it was interesting for me to write the bit about the player, because the player is not a passive receiver. There is a responsibility on the player, the athlete, to actually be intelligent, to be passionate, to be engaged as best they can, and interestingly enough, to help the helpers, to help the people who are helping them, make it an easier job for them. And when a player understands that, I presume that makes a hell of a difference, does it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think You're right, and in other domains in that child's life, they'll understand that if they go to school, that they have to input, they have to contribute to the learning process, that they're not passive, as you say, that they're coachable. That's something I think us as coaches really look for in talent development. When we're working with our athletes, we want our players to feel that they're part of the process, but that they're also contributing to the learning themselves, that our job is to enable, not to do for them.
Yeah.
So actually them knowing their role, that they have a huge responsibility to actually be part of the coaching process, I think actually makes for a much more powerful relationship.
Yeah. And also what we're saying as well in the book is that everybody's responsible for everybody else's learning. So the coach, the player and the parent are actually responsible for each of them learning about how you learn. So it's equally possible for the player, even as a younger child, to actually be quite clear about what the coach needs to do differently in order to help them, and so in other words, coaching the coach, and also the young player coaching their parents. You know, this doesn't seem to work for me. Can you try something else?
Yeah.
So is that quite kind of challenging to the normal way of doing things?
Yeah, I think that there's still a traditional stereotype that if we're the coaches, we have more knowledge than the player and parent. Hence why you're coming to us for the lesson. But what we wanted to do is change the game on this one and say everyone brings so much insight and experience and knowledge and expertise to the table. Whoever you are, if you're the coach, player or parent, that it's really the responsibility of each other to bring their best mindsets and their best attention to everything that they do. So what that means is that the coach is coaching themselves, the coach is coaching the parent, and the coach is coaching the player. But at the same time, everyone's coaching each other. And that's a really different narrative to what we've maybe traditionally been used to, where coach is king and you know, what I say goes. And it makes for a much more healthier alignment between the trio. If everyone's in a safe enough space that they feel they can speak up, ask questions and challenge what's being done and said.
Then in the book, once we've got the roles and responsibilities clear-ish in people's minds, we then zoom out quite substantially into looking at the context that exists, which players, coaches and parents actually have to do their best in. And so we look at the state basically of sport, what's going on in the dynamics generally of sport, and we look at that from an economic, a technological, a social perspective. And so basically what we're saying there, I think, is that the trio is responsible for the future of the game or the sport, as well as for the future of the individual player. So that the more you understand about your sport, the more you actually interact with the dynamics of it, the more likely you are to get what you want. Because, you know, as I guess you'll have thousands of examples of the way in which things are set up does affect the way things happen.
And that's true, because all of the players that are competing in the tennis community are part of something that's bigger than just their lesson, than their tournament. They're part of a structure, they're part of a system, they're part of a federation's initiatives, they're part of a funding mechanism, they're part of so many more things than just themselves. And for parents and coaches to have a much broader lens on what's happening politically, economically, socially, educationally, I think that everyone will be in a much better position to actually, again, understand their roles, understand where they contribute, understand how they can move forwards in the best way possible.
Yeah. So in a way, it's a plea from us, really, that everybody is involved in the sport, actually has some say in how the sport develops. And that's really important for us, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I suppose one of the underlying themes as we get further into the book is what we try to do is to outline the choices that are available to the trio, so they actually know how they can do things, how they can approach things, how they can think and feel about things. So they actually have a much, much broader array of possibility when they approach situations. And that's, so some of the stuff we talk about is proven ways of looking at learning and looking at the way in which athletes develop. But some of it's kind of new and novel and slightly kind of off centre. One of the bits that I quite enjoy about it is that we actually go back to the idea of transcendence, in the sense that everybody understands those small moments of joy when things work. You know, I can remember, as a very poor tennis player, that there were times when you actually hit the perfect shot, and the feeling that goes with that actually motivates you far more than actually winning the game in a way. So I was really pleased we got to that bit in the book. What were your views about transcendence in the book?
Yeah, I agree, and I think you're right. What we want to create is these sweet spot moments where players are creating new versions of themselves, that they're really realizing that all their hard work is paying off, because that things are actually merging to a higher level, that they're forging better versions of the way they play the game and the way they are as human beings. And for me, transcendence, when we looked at that whole chapter, was around when everything works at the same time, and you're feeling like you're in absolute flow, that brings a real spiritual type of feeling to how you're actually enjoying the sport. And both parents and coaches need to not just notice it every now and again, but to coach it, to really bring it to fruitful life in a lesson, to talk about it in the car on the way to a tournament, but to make players really aware of what's going on at a deeper level themselves.
Yes, because it allows you to kind of not worry about, winning the match all the time. We do talk a lot about and try and frame the idea that tennis definitely is a win-lose sport. I mean, people lose every day, right. And unless you win a tournament, you leave a tournament as a loser. But that doesn't mean you can't have a win-win career and a win-win life in tennis. And it's really important that people understand that and have much more motivation coming from a sense of fulfillment rather than just the inevitable losses and some wins that they're all going to have.
And that's Keith, if you mind just talking a little bit about, we talk in chapter 3 about values, and that tennis offers so much more than just a rating and a ranking, and winning a trophy, not winning a trophy, but actually that over the course of a career, and however long your career is and whatever level you get to, what people talk about when they look back at tennis in their life, that it's been a hugely powerful and important part of who they've become as a human being. And we talk a lot about that, right? About values and beliefs. Do you want to just go into a bit more about that?
Yeah, so my sense is that that if you can become values-led in the manner in which you approach sport and generally life, then it's a really good navigational tool, because there are always options for behaving in different situations. But if you can actually go back to, well, what do I really believe about who I am as a person, my identity, how significant do I want to be, and then look at competence, what do I therefore need to develop, backhand, forehand, life skills, whatever it is, then you're more likely to get to where it is you want to get to. Because if it's values driven, it's about things that are important to you. It's about things you stand for or you stand against as a person. And generally, we don't examine those as deeply as we suggest you should do in the book. But once you get a clear sense of what those are, and they're aligned with the values of sport and tennis in general, which are about fairness, about lack of exploitation, about making sure that people can be their best. If your values are aligned with the sport values, then they can be a very, very good compass for how you move forward and choose the right kinds of behaviour. The right kinds of behaviour as a parent, because obviously the parent needs the right values, the coach needs the right values, and the player needs the right values.
Yeah, and the values again starts with, we say attitude reflects leadership, and how should we expect our players to be good citizens with strong values if we don't examine ourselves, our values, and actually live them out as real behaviours every day?
Yes.
And I think that's a real issue sometimes, real dissonance there when people are saying one thing but they're doing another thing.
Yeah.
And I think as coaches we must really sense check ourselves all the time and have the humility to pull ourselves up and each other up when we're not abiding to those values.
Yeah. So it's kind of the scene of the coach, really being very aggressive with the player, because the player is actually being too aggressive on the court and breaking his racket. It's kind of a bit silly, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So everybody has to be in sync with that one. Yeah. So I suppose what we're saying is that the trio has what we could call a relationship journey or relationship adventure. I'm not so keen on the journey word anymore. But that is not just one adventure, it's a series of adventures. The trio will change quite a lot. I mean, we quote one of the coaches in the book saying that to get to Fed Cup level, probably people will have been through 8 iterations of different coaches.
Yeah.
So that would be 8 iterations of parent, player, coach. So it is a journey. And that journey, I think, can be characterised by a joining phase where there's a connecting up phase where you actually agree common purpose, you agree some sense of what it is you're trying to achieve with each other. Then there's the achieving phase after the joining phase, which is where you actually do the work of actually becoming, of attaining more mastery of what it is you've agreed to do. And then there's the moving on phase, which is inherent in what I've just said, is that if people are changing coaches, there's a goodbye and there's a hello, so that you then move on to a new joining. Could you talk a little bit about that and your views on that?
So I think for any player, parent, and coach, they're all going through these stages of transitions all throughout their career, and it could be a coach changing coach. It could be moving to a new academy that your son to train at. Could be that you're changing schools. Could be that you're meeting new friends. And what we're saying here is that each part of this joining, achieving, and moving on is equally as important as each other. And often we can create real sour spot moments if we don't maximise everyone's input into the success of those transitions in each of the stages. And so for young players, probably the most common one is changing coach. And it can be a very traumatic experience at times if it's done badly.
Yeah.
And it's often done badly, and it's often chosen not in the right way, and it's often chosen with not necessarily the best interests of the player at heart. And in the book we go into lots more detail about how we can practically do this in a much more successful way.
Yeah, and what we're very keen on is the whole idea of contracting. And in general life, obviously, contracting is really important. The battalions of lawyers are drawing up contracts all the time. But in the sporting world, it's not as obvious, is it? It's just kind of, everybody hopes everything will pan out the way you want it to pan out without having the conversation. So say a little bit about contracting and how important that is and why it's difficult, basically.
So I think the relationship journey, or adventure as you say, it starts with everyone being very clear on their roles and responsibilities and what everyone's going to bring to the table and offer throughout that period of employment. And the problem is with tennis often is, and many sports, is we often pay for the hours that we do. So there's a kind of gig economy type contract that we have in our relationship contract with parents and players. And what we're saying is that if parents and players and coaches can at the very very start, instead of just going to the court and hitting balls and observing the player through a technical lens, but seeing it as a much more of a service, seeing it as a service that the coach is going to provide, going to tournaments, sitting down with a parent, goal setting, working with the strength and conditioning coach, that there's lots of the entourage that need managing throughout this coaching adventure. So the contract for us should start very, very early in the relationship, front and center of the conversation about what I'm going to do for you, when I'm going to do it, how I'm going to do it, so everyone is absolutely clear of their responsibilities.
And from our experience, we found that it actually allows people to relax a bit because they know they can come back to their contract. They can say, well, we did say we would do this and we're not doing it, and you're not playing your part in this way and that way. So it gives you the kind of comfort that you've actually kind of given yourself a framework to go back to, rather than have to go, oh God, I have to say this to this person for the first time and we never agreed it.
Yeah. I think it helps avoid real unnecessary conflict later on in the relationship, which then can again cause the relationship to break down or fracture too early.
Good, yeah. So another underlying theme is how you use your energy, how the coach, the parent and the player uses their energy to bring about change with each other in relation to tennis, in relation generally to life. How do you make things happen? How do you make a difference in the world? And our sense is that, as we say in the book, that there are three ways you can use your energy. You can use your energy to actually kind of coming from you to the other person. Whether you're the coach, the parent, the player, you're actually shoving out energy in order to influence what's going on around you. And that's kind of the typical conventional, I guess, the end of the Second World War energy. I'm here to instruct you and you will do as you're told. If you don't, then we fail. Whereas then after that it became the idea of use your energy to actually draw people out. So everybody actually knows a lot about things. Even if they're young, they still have a view. And that view, because it's their view and we're talking about their development, is important. So how do you draw out from people, use your energy to pull? So asking questions, open-ended questions, really getting the wisdom out of the people around you. So if you're the coach, getting the wisdom out of the parent, getting the wisdom out of the player. If you're the coach, getting the wisdom out of the parent, the wisdom out of the player. So you're actually maximising the resource that's available to you as the coach by drawing out from the others. Our view, and this is a kind of recent development over the last 10 years, is that that's not enough to actually just kind of for an individual to be somebody who's pushing or pulling can be very fruitful and very helpful. But there is another energy, which is a joining energy, where you actually join forces, join the energy of the trio and anybody else you're interacting with, to actually create more than the sum of the parts. And that kind of sense of really having common purpose, really having joint ways of working, really having kind of an empathy. And we talk about, later on in the book around resilience, about kind of how important empathy is and how mirror neurons allow us as humans to actually stand in each other's shoes and build on each other's energy. So that's at a very general level. And have you got any thoughts about the kind of behaviours that go with those energies?
So one thing I wanted just to add to that, Keith, was I think what's really powerful about the book, what we write about, is that as a coach there are implications for over or underuse of your style as a coach. And we all will have a natural style from the way we were brought up, or perhaps coaches or parents that had influence on us. And again, I think it's a real responsibility now for the coach to understand the generations that we're working with. And we've did a lot of work and reading for the book around understanding Generation X, Y, and the millennials. And it's changed. And what we're finding is that a lot of these children now are really wanting to be part of the lesson. They don't want to be passive. They want to contribute through conversations, asking questions, and challenging us. And we need to be really comfortable with that as coaches. And then sometimes we need to be appropriately authoritative. So this idea that what we say in the book, that there's definitely a balance between using all different styles as a coach, being appropriately authoritative and appropriately enabling will allow you to have a wider range of skills as a coach to deal with both parents and players, and vice versa. And then you talk about, in the book about learning, because we have to understand that not just millennials are different, but different types of millennials are different. So therefore, we have to understand the learning styles and the learning preferences of each of the different types of athletes that we're working with, and some that will really find it quite uncomfortable being asked questions. And we say in the book, well, if that's not their learning preference, that's fine to understand that and be really empathetic towards that, but at the same time to push people outside of their comfort zone so they really expand their skill set, is to actually expose them to different types of learning opportunities. So as a coach, there's understanding how to coach our styles and behaviours, but there's also understanding the styles and behaviours of our athletes. And if we can marry those two up again, we'll find real sweet spots.
Absolutely. And it's not, well, I suppose what we're trying to say is that the more options you have, the more likely you are to choose the appropriate behaviour and appropriate style with each other, if you know each other well enough to do that. So that's really, really important. We do have a bit of fun with it in terms of, it's not just the words you choose to use with each other. We get quite granular about the kinds of words and what kind of effects they have. But it's also what we call not just the words, but the music and the dance. And I know you like all that stuff. So
yeah,
just say a little bit about that.
So again, we believe that a sweet spot can be really created when the coach is given an intervention, having a powerful conversation with the athlete, when they can marry up the right words, so the language that we use, with kind of the tone of their voice, the music, the musicality of how they deliver. We know sometimes it's how we say things that are as important as what we say. And then also the dance, which really is that kind of the body language that you have as a coach. It's how you actually sit, listen, behave, smile, all these things that are so important in creating very powerful relationships with the athlete.
Yeah, and they do make such a difference. I mean, the player who looks up and sees the parent or the coach scowling from the sidelines, the effect of that is was much bigger than you would expect. Even if they're going, come on, if they're doing it with a scowl rather than a smile, it's the scowl that people see, not the words. They don't hear the words properly. The words come across as, you're not doing very well here, rather than, you're doing great, carry on. That's very important.
And on that, Keith, I think we talk in the book a lot about blind spots, these kind of hidden areas that we just don't know we're doing it. And often the parent that's doing that, the scowling, is not even aware that they're doing that. Exactly. So that's why you need the trio. That's why the trio is such an important dynamic, because it allows you to empower each other to be the best versions of themselves. Once again, it allows the parent to say to the coach, look, coach, you're doing that a lot more than you should be doing it, and my son is really finding it difficult to deal with that. And there's a tough conversations to have, but there's such an important conversation to have to, again, allow for a much more fruitful relationship.
Yeah.
So Keith, we talk a lot about emotions in the
Yes.
chapter. Why is that such an important chapter? Because it's the largest chapter in the book to you for the parent, player and coach.
Well, when the world's going swimmingly, when things are working well, generally there's a kind of, you're working in a following wind in your life. Things aren't that hard. You behave spontaneously. You seem to be able to access your intelligence and your wisdom and your feelings, well. The problem is that tennis is a win-lose game, and it creates stress. And as human beings, we find it more difficult to make useful decisions under stress. You talked about blind spots earlier, but another way of looking at it is that basically, sometimes under stress, we move to our worst self. We actually work from a negative belief about ourselves. Everybody has negative beliefs about themselves, and they're more evident when stress is around. So if you could kind of, at match point down, it's more likely you're going to be down on yourself than you would be if you were kind of, just won the first set 6-love. So it's really important we understand these negative belief cycles, so that under stress, if we have a negative belief, we start to kind of fantasize about what's wrong. So if we have a negative belief that we always crumble under pressure, when the pressure comes on, we begin to get negative messages in our head like, oh God, this is going to be awful, I'm not going to be able to handle this, I always lose against this opponent, I always lose if I'm I've lost the first 2 points in a match. So you start to kind of make all these fantasies in your head, which of course disrupt your performance. Suddenly you actually can't concentrate. As simple as physiologically, you don't breathe properly, and therefore you actually can't deliver the tennis stroke or whatever it is you're supposed to be doing in general life when you're not stressed, which leads to a confirmation of the negative belief. So this is a vicious cycle. This is definitely a sour spot. Where under stress a negative belief happens, you begin to disrupt your thinking and your feeling processes, your performance gets disrupted, and then you go, yeah, there you go again, I've just done it all over, I always fold at this particular time because I believe I crumble under pressure. So we all have these, and even the most accomplished athletes have them, and it's how you get out of them which is the issue. How do you actually... And the way in which you do is actually become aware, because they are blind spots, become aware of what the negative belief is. So if you can actually, with the help of the coach and the parent, help the player find out what these little messages in our head are, which do disrupt us, then it's really helpful, because suddenly you actually are going, oh right, is that really what I believe? It goes back to the values type stuff. I don't value myself as somebody who crumbles under pressure, though I seem to. So getting that out in the open and having it as a shared conversation really does help, because then you're focusing on the issue rather than the fact that you didn't win the point, we didn't win the game, we didn't win the match. That's the first thing. The second thing is to realise that the negative messages in your head are fantasy. They're just, you could say, I'm doing brilliantly here. It might not be true, but it's as true as the fact that I'm doing badly here, because the issue is what you do next, not what you're feeling now. So understanding that that fantasies are fantasies is really important. We talk a lot about in the book about how you actually disrupt the performance disruption. How do you actually get back to peak performance? And we focus on that an enormous amount in terms of the manner in which you approach your development and your training, and the manner in which you approach yourself and other people. There's a lot of detail on that, but that's basically kind of, you put yourself in situations which approximate the stress that you're under, and you find different ways of actually getting around them, under them, over them, so that when you actually hit the stress in the tennis match or in real life, you're actually better equipped to deal with it. You know how to kind of harness your psychology and harness your attention to actually moving through it.
And Keith, one of the practical solutions that parents who are watching a tense moment at a tournament, or players that are involved in the heat of the battle in a crucial game, or coaches that are in a lesson that are finding it difficult to get their message across, that they're feeling this stress and these negative beliefs start to play out. One of the solutions we talk a lot about is the importance of breathing. Do you want to just go into a bit more about that?
Well, it's extraordinary that it's something which isn't taught. It's like the analogy I use is it's like the last person to know about the water is the fish. We're so used to being alive that it's only when breath disappears that we actually notice we need to do it. So, and breathing is fundamental to everything we do, and particularly high performance sport. If your breathing's not right, it's interrupted by the psychology of what's going on rather than the physicality of what's going on, that we actually have to access it as quickly as possible. And we call it, it's the first thing you do when you actually understand that things aren't working, is to go back to your breathing. And we talk a lot about the book, about the way in which it activates the vagal system, which is the nervous system which allows us to feel as if we actually are competent and allows us to access past success, which allows us to be rational in the moment rather than kind of diminished by what's going on in our psychology. So breathing is extremely important, and very few of us, including me and you, I guess, do it as well as we could do, particularly under stress.
Well, and just to add to that, I think you're absolutely right. I think we all know the importance of breathing, but it's teaching it explicitly to our younger athletes that, as you said, maybe take it for granted, or let the physicality of the point determine their breathing patterns. And that's what you see with young players at tournaments a lot, is that under very long points or in the heat, or under stressful situations, they start to lose control of their breathing. They don't take their 20 seconds allocated in between points to really recover well, to rest, digest, to center themselves a little bit more. And it's something that in other sports is taught a lot more, but certainly in the tennis community, we don't necessarily give it the airtime that it actually requires.
Yeah, because I suppose in swimming you have to learn, otherwise you get a mouthful of water and you begin to choke.
Absolutely, it would be part of the teaching curriculum in something like swimming, and I don't necessarily know if it's always taught as an explicit competency of younger athletes, and even older players. If you see the likes of Djokovic now, really dramatising the depth and intensity of breathing to really centre himself and feel relaxed throughout the whole body. Because breathing, it's in through the mouth and nose, but it's felt throughout the whole of the body. Yeah. And that's what we want to do. We want to have the right degree of relaxation and athleticism. And that's always a tough balance to get. But centering yourself so you're fully recovered and calm and relaxed is one of our major messages in the book, to help our younger athletes in a stressful sport where you win a point, lose a point. The success and failure is felt so quickly in tennis. Unlike golf, where you hit a ball and then you get 20 minutes to get over your bad shot, in tennis you don't have that length of time to get over these emotional negative beliefs. No, so breathing is one of the most important practical things to do with younger athletes.
Yeah. So which brings up the issue, you actually have to train with a physicality which actually allows the stress of the real situation to come through. We also talk a little bit about best on best. Can you say a little bit about that? Because I know it's something that interests you.
So this is something that is research done in many sports, that if you can bring the best talent with the best expertise against the best talent and train daily, weekly, monthly, not only is it hugely motivating for the athletes, but they actually create better versions of themselves. They push each other's levels up and up and up until they forge a new version of themselves and they become better players. And that's always tough geographically, because where people live and getting the best to come together as regularly as that maybe you would like to. But the role of academies and training camps, which do bring these best players, what we've seen over time, Keith, is that not only do they become better players, but they become better people, because they like enjoying the competitiveness of actually improving. Yeah. It's hugely motivating and rewarding for our younger athletes.
Yes, it is, and it is intriguing that there is a point of mastery where you're not actually playing the other person, you're playing yourself, and on both sides of the net, both people are trying to transcend their last best to become even better. And what you're watching is magic. It's not just a tennis match anymore, or it's not just a hockey match. There's a rhythm to it, and there's a kind of transcendence to it, which really is exciting for the audience as well. And leads that experience, that sporting experience, where people go away and they remember what happened. They might not even remember the scoreline, but they remember the feelings they had watching it. And the players certainly remember the feelings. And actually watching some coaches as well, my goodness me, they go through absolute kind of roller coasters of emotions, don't they? And they don't forget those emotions when it works.
And we must remember that this is applied to all players of all ages and stages. Yes, we see it at Wimbledon. We see the very best at the very best in their career with the very best, being their best. It always looks like it's just at Wimbledon. But let's be really clear that these younger athletes are going through these similar emotional feelings and flow, and the God within them is coming out. And it might just be little 9-year-old Jimmy that it's happening to. But trust me, he's feeling that sport. They just might not be able to articulate what's happening, and that's for the job of the coach and the parent is to make them aware of what's happening.
And also to build on that, because that if you can actually find your own repertoire of success, and when you go vamos, I mean that must mean something to you, and that's the kind of a sign of that transcendent moment. And we really do believe that that's very important. You build your repertoires, and you actually build a sense of your identity for you, but also the player opposite you knows who you are and what they're going to have to deal with, and the audience kind of falls in love with you because they know you for your idiosyncrasies. Mm-hmm. We had quite fun with the chapter on what's the difference between a ritual and a superstition. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, so rituals are clearly important to help us move through life. So we have patterns of behaviour that we go to when we're in uncomfortable, difficult, stressful situations. But superstitions are those kind of erroneous bad beliefs that maybe stop us. They block us from progressing. They block us from achieving our best performances. And there are some superstitions that the players have to wear the same underwear, or they have to go to the same restaurants every night, and these are important parts of the routines that the players really believe. But then there are some superstitions that are not helpful, like I always lose against left-handed players, or I hate playing in the sun, and I never want to play on the outside courts, and I hate playing indoors. And these are actually, again, these negative beliefs that are imprinted in people's minds that we have to try and help coach out of them from a very young age, so they become more resilient athletes. But of course, rituals are incredibly important. Yeah. How many times someone bounces the ball, where they look to in the stand, how many bottles of water they put down. If you look at all top tennis players or sports athletes in general, they will go to their preferences of behaviours, of patterns, of routines and rituals to actually enable some security in them achieving peak performance.
Yeah, and if you watch people who are at that peak flow, we get into the whole idea of self-soothing, the way they touch themselves, and the way they stroke themselves, the way they kind of put their hand on their heart, all these kind of like strange little kind of idiosyncrasies, but serve the purpose of actually reminding themselves that they're actually human and that they are kind of with themselves. They're actually, that flow is really, really important. So I've found that particularly fascinating, and you're absolutely right. It's not just about the best players. We all do it. We all have ways of actually kind of holding ourselves so that we can be our best, and understanding what those are and training for them very early is really, really important. So we chose to end the book in a very purposeful way, really looking at what a tennis life can give you, not just what being a good tennis player can give you. And one of the final quotes in the book is from Judy Murray, where she says, "I am enormously proud of them, but take away the achievements, I'm also enormously proud of them as young men. They are good boys, they are humble, they are hard-working, they are good role models. That's what I'm most proud of, that they are good people." So that's Judy Murray talking about Jamie and Andy. So we do choose to end the book on that note, because really it's about, if you actually follow the kinds of advice we give in the book, you will actually be dealing with your whole life, not just tennis or any other sport that you're engaged in. Have you got some views on that, Sam?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think for parents, it can be incredibly difficult, tennis, in a sense that if they're not from the sport themselves, being informed on what are the best choices to make to help your child reach their potential is an incredibly simple question, but poses a lot of obstacles and challenges, and leaves parents, generally confused and challenged by that. And what Judy's saying there is, and I guess our message in the book is that it could be very seductive to get into the pressures of what tennis the pathway, the
Yeah.
competitive system is providing your child. And you'll have some great moments on this journey. And you'll only realize maybe they're great if you think about them looking back.
Yeah.
And we want people to really enjoy the present.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plan for the future, have great coaching, great connections, understand about your roles, but at the same time understand that tennis can provide such an amazing experience for not just for your child, but for you to enjoy with your child
Yes,
as well.
absolutely, yeah.
And that's what Judith's saying there, is that when she's looking back now, she's just so proud of how these young men have grown into be real role models and leave a legacy in tennis. And no matter what level your child gets to, they will leave an imprint in the sport, in the fabric, that will go on into their community, to their school maybe they're just playing for, or maybe their local club,
Yep.
or they become coaches. That the exit routes from tennis are wide and broad now, and that tennis is such an important part of people's lives in general, their family life, their holiday life, their school life, that actually we need to use that and really pay it forwards. And so many times, I'm seeing a lot of parents really struggle to understand that. They're so caught up in the winning, the rating, the ranking, the being recognised by the federation, being selected for national camps, that they become seduced by the system rather than zooming out for a second and going, well, right, how is my child really enjoying their tennis? What are they getting from it? What kind of person are they developing into? Okay, we didn't get picked. Doesn't matter. There's another chance. There's so many opportunities to achieve your potential in tennis. It's not to really magnify the one issue in the here and now, but to see a much longer adventure, as you say, than just a critical moment that didn't go your way.